Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Is this working? Okay, good. So, Kimberly, from two Old English words, Signberg, or Kinberg, meaning royal fortress, and Lear, or ley, meaning glade or forest. Through some strained connotations, convolutions of thought, and terrible puns, I could probably base the whole introduction around that. About Kimberly's castle-like strength as a person, her magisterial grasp of the language, how she's carved her way through the copses and thickets of academia, perhaps clearing out some of its dead wood on the way. And Campanello. I really can't be the first or the last person to say that name rings a bell. But I could certainly make a painful metaphor out of it about how Kimberly Campanello has opened doors for students and for colleagues as well, and how she's gone from welcome visitor standing in the entrance of 10 Cavendish Road to one of the established members of the household here in the School of English. Kimberly Campanello from Elkhart, Indiana. Elkhart, the self-styled band instrument capital of the world and self-styled recreation vehicle capital of the West. In the tortured language of good band instruments, Kimberly marches to the beat of her own drum, quite rightly blows her own trumpet when necessary, and knows mellifluous lyricism when she hears it. And like all good recreation vehicles, no. Too far. Thinking back to when I first met Kimberly in 2018, the name Kimberly Campanello only rang a distant bell, from as far away as York St. John's, in fact. Although she remembers me from that day because I was on the interview panel when she applied for a position within the faculty. During her presentation, I asked her a question that she's since described as dastardly. I think that's what she said. Sometimes in American, Irish, Italian, English, Yorkshire, the D and the B are transposed. But let's assume dastardly. A dastardly question which was, what's the definition of a good poem? I don't recall her exact answer, but it was clearly enough to get her the job. Unlike another interviewee that day, who was already struggling when I asked him, how would you define a bad poem? I can't remember what he said either, but I'm sure he was thinking, poems like yours, mate. Since her arrival at Leeds shortly afterwards, Kimberly has fostered the growth of creative writing in the School of English, establishing and leading the BA English Literature with Creative Writing, inaugurating the student literary magazine Tenterhook, developing a new MA in creative writing, recruiting new colleagues, and supporting a growing cohort of PhD researchers in creative writing. As well as being a poet, she's a critic, thinker, essayist, academic, teacher, lecturer, filmmaker, presenter, translator, collaborator, and many more things besides. Someone with so many talents and specialisms and interests that in just 2 years at Leeds, she already had a bigger office than mine. By the way, if you're wondering where the School of English broom cupboard is, just look for a door with my name on it. Of her book, MOTHERBABYHOME, a near 800-page visual poetry object, huge in scale, ambition, and accomplishment, literally 3 times bigger than my office. Brackets, let it go, Simon. Of that book, Padraig Tuam, author of 50 Poems to Change Your World, said, Kimberly Campanello is an extraordinary poet. Her long sequence, Mother Baby Home, is a fragmentary piece bringing small memories of abandoned people to our ears in simple language that is overwhelming. I heard her recite at the Word of Mouth event in Belfast and haven't stopped thinking about it since. It is a confrontation a lamentation, a powerful objection, and a revolution. A copy is currently on display at the Museum of Literature Ireland, an institution not short of famous editions written by esteemed authors, where presumably it is currently awaiting the availability of a Pickford's removals lorry and several muscle-bound powerlifters to transport it to further exhibitions. She is an inaugural winner of Ireland's Markowitz Award, and her poem, Moving Nowhere Here, on her experience of young onset Parkinson's diagnosis, was the most read poem in Granta in 2023. Kimberly's next poetry collection, An Interesting Detail, will be released by Bloomsbury Poetry in 2025, a more understated title I can't imagine for an author of such curiosity, originality, ingenuity, inventiveness, and focus. During my current efforts to develop a national poetry centre here on campus, Kimberly's been a staunch supporter, ready to offer advice and comradeship, and I look forward enormously to her involvement in whatever joint ventures take place between the School of English and the National Poetry Centre as it emerges from the unsanitary detritus of a nightclub once known as the Quilted Llama. Kimberly, you'll be welcome in my new office there anytime, with its white grand piano, diamond-encrusted desk, Olympic-sized pool, and panoramic views as far as the Ural Mountains. As a member of the teaching staff, Kimberly is hugely popular with both students and colleagues alike, valued for her generosity of thought, her enthusiasm and expertise, and her friendly and approachable nature around the building and campus. The number of people here tonight is both a testimony to the warmth of her personality, her creative mind, her capacity for literary analysis, and her playful and sometimes mischievous intelligence. We all want to hear what she's got to say, how she's going to say it, although some of us are a little anxious about a potential audience participation element. Only this morning, I was watching a film clip of her coordinating some kind of active installation poem involving the grating of carrots. Since she arrived here, I've been proud to call her a colleague, and I found myself describing her to other people outside the university as a friend, a title I hope she accepts, along with her other title, which we're celebrating tonight, that of Professor. But before we welcome Professor Kimberly Campanello to the stage, please welcome Adam Hanna, who's going to say a few more words about MOTHERBABYHOME. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you, and thank you. It's a huge honor to be part of this celebration as somebody who has read and written about Kimberly Campanello's work for years now. Now, 90 years ago, Samuel Becket said that Irish poets could be divided into two categories. There were antiquarians on the one hand, and then there were others. And he very much favored the second group, the others. And her poetry puts her work firmly in this noble category. Her work is that of a citizen of the World Republic of Letters, and I want to pay tribute to her work as an event and landmark in the history of Irish poetry. I published a book a couple of years ago on Irish poetry since the start of the 20th century, and it ended with her work. And the reason I did this is because her poetry represents a new departure in the field. Her work is a continual surprise and challenge. It makes me question things I have never even considered before. Hers is a restless, questing intellect that goes with a fierce sense of justice. She's an artist whose work questions every element of received practice, and to me, she is a poet in the original sense of that word, a creator. So in the next few minutes, I just want to talk about how Kimberly Campanello extends the vocabulary of Irish poetry in the literal sense, but also its visual, its tactile, even its moral scope. And I'll mainly be talking about her 796-page monumental work, MOTHERBABYHOME, which you can see disarranged on the stage beside me. MOTHERBABYHOME, all words with positive associations, but in Ireland used in conjunction, they carry a cold echo. The St. Mary's Mother and Baby Home in Tuam, County Galway, is at the heart of this work. It was one of many similar institutions. It was run by the Bon Secours sisters on behalf of the Irish state to house unmarried mothers and their children, and the death rate of the children who were held there was extremely high. The location of the graves of the children who died there between 1925 and 1961 went unrecorded. So in recent years, there have been a mix of local knowledge and detective work that led to the discovery of these bodies in a secret burial ground. And Campanello's work, which you can see, MOTHERBABYHOME, is, among much else, a ritual and a monument to the small lives that they were not granted by their own society. In Ireland, we have come to a reckoning in recent years about the people that the church, the state, society more widely did not value. And part of the reason Campanello's work is so respected, certainly by me and by others who read Irish poetry, is it shows the way towards the necessary words and gestures and rituals in the ongoing work of accounting for the past. As an encounter with a hidden past, her work is necessarily disconcerting. I'll give you an example. We all think we know how to read a collection of poems. Books in front of you, you open the cover down its left-hand margin, basic stuff. But MOTHERBABYHOME is, as you can see, different. There's one object in Leeds, there's one in Dublin currently in the Museum of Literature Ireland, there's one in Tuam, County Galway. So to encounter these, a reader has to make an appointment and perform necessary rituals, those of the research library. Divest yourself of bag and coat, use only pencils rather than pens, sign slips agreeing not to reproduce or photocopy. There are rituals of divestment and preparation. The inconveniences are part of the artwork. These awkwardnesses are part of the encounter with the work itself. So, encountering her poetry, we aren't opening the cover of a book. We must come to a realization, rather, of the ways in which the poetry performs us. The normal verb is to read a book of poems. But you don't just read MOTHERBABYHOME, you encounter it. It's an experience of the body. The reader carries it over to their desk, it's disturbingly heavy, and you open it and it consists of hundreds of vellum sheets. You can't leaf through it like you might through a book. Most collections of poetry implicitly ask us to read them from front to back. But this one suggests a process of digging top to bottom. As a physical thing, it's a problem. You have to remove each sheet with your fingertips, find a place for it, ensure that there is a logic to that temporary place, so that eventually you can place it all back together in the order you find it. Its readers must find a way to accommodate it. This is poetry whose physical form asks something from us. It makes us consider the duties we owe as readers, as citizens. Campanello's work is a passionate reconfiguration of archival source material, and she disarranges that material on the page. The words break down, sentences are fragmented, repetitions are overtyped and layered. The legal and religious language, which makes up so much of how the events at Tuam were recorded, is the language of authority and power, and it is re-presented in MOTHERBABYHOME. These choices are strategic and subversive acts because when the language of laws and of legal documents are revealed to be malleable at a stylistic and typographical level, their historicity gets revealed too. The documents on which these poems are based, and by extension, the world that created those documents, are shown to be subject to question and challenge and change. The pages of the work become more difficult to lift out the deeper the reader goes. And what happens to the reader who is by now the performer, or who is perhaps being performed by it? Well, they become aware of their responsibility of gentleness towards the artwork. Readers depend on bindings of books for textual stability. And so this work raises interesting, maybe troubling questions over the issue of authorship itself. And Campanello acknowledges this. This is not by me, she has written recently. It is of many. So, as a reader of poetry, Campanello's work makes me consider and question and experience things I have never encountered before. To give another example, there's her use of semi-transparent vellum for the printed pages. Like so much else in this poetry object, it asks for our capacities for reflection. At a haptic level, the choice of material communicates a reassuring sense of durability. It could not be easily destroyed or disfigured. At a historic level, when you handle crisp, smooth vellum, it's the feel of authority. Traditionally made from the stretched skins of young animals, it's been used for revered documents from the Book of Kells to the Gutenberg Bible and on. Modern vellum, like that used in Mother-Baby-Home, is made of cellulose fibers rather than animal hides, but it still hasn't lost its associations with the organic. Vellum is etymologically related to the word veal, after all, and so using it raises ideas of violence against the young. One scholar estimated to make the 30 Gutenberg Bibles in existence, 5,000 calves were slaughtered and skinned. So in the material of Mother-Baby-Home, there are messages, religion, authority, cruelty to the young. They're all bound up in these unbound pages. The eeriness of that choice of material should be dwelt on. Because the reader can see through to other pages than the ones they're reading, unusual elements on following pages further down, diagrams and maps, are literally foreshadowed, and so the reader sees them emerging dimly at first beneath several layers, clarifying as they approach through the pages as the reader works their way down through the stack. And once the reader puts down the transparent sheet on its front, the type is still visible, creating a backwards typed ghost poem that accumulates as you read it. To turn the page on something, it's metaphorical of closure. But how can you turn the page when the page is transparent? What I'm saying is that her work interrogates, in a brilliant way, almost every element of the expected physical and sensory experience of reading a poem. To encounter this work, we have to concentrate and be patient and ask questions. And therefore, her work awakens us to ourselves as beings who can concentrate and be patient and question. Campanello's work is a reminder that the expected things, rationality and legality and trusted institutions and unquestionable authorities, have brought us, among much else, to the secret burial ground at Tuam. And that's why Campanello's status as an other in Irish poetry is so important. Hers is not poetry that gives us answers, but rather through its innovativeness, through its sheer unexpectedness. Her poetry makes us alive to our own capacities to question, to our lives as makers of meanings. And if you don't know her work, you'll see what I mean by all this when she gives her lecture performance. So I'll just finish by saying that as somebody who has lived her poetry, I owe her my profound admiration and thanks. And thank you.
Hey, so I'm testing the mic by saying, hey, everybody, how's it going? You're here for poetry. You're here for words. You're here to hear me speak about words. That's why we're here on a campus a lot of the time. So thanks to Simon and Adam for that, and thanks to everybody who's made tonight possible. I'm going to monitor my own clicker, so we'll see how well that goes. Ta-da. We break things, even though we are free. Ourselves, living characters, speak shame on shame, where eyes cast inward like rings on trees. To see it, we adjust the rings on the machine. The sun has already joined the horizon. That spot people kill and kill to hold moves to the top again. I emerge from the great river like night. If I survive longer than the day, I drop the scales of justice on the opposite side. Instead of amazement, you better try thinking. To scale this wall, you may need reminding. The power you have comes from something unwinding. In the middle of it all, the line of time, the equalizer in knowledge and life, it always remains between sun and ice. The rough kingdom, I've been through it. The good sky moved me, I come with it. Here I am now telling you about it. 1,000 years gone, it seems briefer than eternity. An eyelash moving amidst the sky's relentless turning. I'll get to it later. I'm here to speak on the subject of words. I'm speaking in public as a poet about words. The public poet. Visionaries. Unacknowledged legislators of the world, according to Shelley. Poets conjure a we, illuminate the everyday, serve language, are commissioned, work in and for and against institutions. Poets rattle the powerful, get banned along the way. About the public poet is you, the public poet is you, the public poet is you. It's you too and you as well, and many more public poets have papers in the library here, Sarah, and libraries elsewhere. Some papers and poets have yet to be found. Thank you, critics. But they are still public. They are still with us, still us. Some disavow the idea that poetry does anything at all. Some deny that words change states. They say it makes nothing happen, that it's better to do poetry or art just for the sake of it, or not at all. But of course, for the sake of it, does things, changes things too, in various ways, to various states, states of being, feeling, doing. Let's ask John Dewey. Art is the enhancement of the processes of everyday life. Life. It's a process, not a thing. Life is doing things, like reading and listening. Life is making things, like poems. So we've dealt with that. Let's also please avoid the idea that poetry must be a certain way to be understood by the public. The public are pretty damn sharp, in my experience. And of course, they're quite big. They and they, which is we, which is I, which is you, and many others are various. Take a second now. Look at us. Breathe in. Smell the scents that you brought in off the street. Listen. Processes of everyday moving. Processes of everyday living. Sensing. Differently, though near. Similarly to how it's done way over there. Dewey says, the hostility to the association of fine art with normal processes of living is a pathetic, even tragic commentary on life as it is ordinarily lived. Only because life is usually so stunted, aborted, slack, or heavy-laden is the idea entertained that there is in some inherent antagonism between the process of normal living and creation and enjoyment of works of aesthetic art. In other words, cuts to the arts are not normal. The idea that art should do or be a certain thing in order to reach people is not normal, nor is the idea that making and enjoying art for certain people, for instance, art only by and for those who have leisure time or credentials. A leisure time often resulting from cumulative destructions, extractions, occlusions, and misattributions of the causes of the suffering of others, which includes blaming those same suffering people as though they deserved it or are predestined for it because. The public poet Norbese Philip agrees that words change states. Language, she knows, is controlled, feared by the powerful. Public poets know this. Begin anywhere. I began with wanting to subvert, to destroy the lyric voice. I felt it could not bear the weight of my history. All this was presumptuous, perhaps, but that was how I felt. I also questioned the tradition of the solitary voice of the poet, often male, a white male who embodied the wisdom of society and who spoke for, on behalf of, and to his society and culture in a voice of authority. In Zong, Norbese Philip moves from the destruction of the lyric voice to generation of these voices. She creates voices using only a small bit of language from the state, the language of the law regarding a case that was heard here on this island, in this island's capital, not so long ago at all. The capital, with its grand buildings of leisure and learning, erected in a frenzy of belief in the value and importance of enlightening minds and what minds are capable of doing. The potential we have, the human, the humanities, for some. Many buildings were erected at the time the words of that case were first spoken and noted down for storing, where they waited until Norbese Philip opened them up. The words of that case were about determining whether the deliberate killing of enslaved people by a ship's crew was justified and so warranted an insurance payout. Herself a lawyer as well as a poet, Norbese uses this state language to make new words on the surface of water, to remember differently. Words change states. States change. The public poet, the ancestors speak. And of course, the original phrase of Auden's is about the Irish public poet Yeats. And Auden says a little bit more than just that famous phrase. For poetry makes nothing happen. It survives in the valley of its making, where executives would never want to tamper. Flows on south, from ranches of isolation and the busy griefs, raw towns that we believe and die in. It survives, a way of happening, a mouth. This is poetry being poetry. This is not necessarily legislative or immediately empirically measurable change. It's not easy or forever or always change. It's change as in these scenes of Superman and this kid from Indiana, unwreaking havoc. It's not quite that extreme, but it's something. It's a way of happening, a mouth. It survives. It's poetry figuring itself, but not figuring itself out. It's something happening in a moment, but always. Poetry should strike the reader as a wording of his own highest thoughts and appear almost a remembrance. Everything is changed in a minute. It will never be the same in there. Not the fir trees, nor the gables, nor the faces. So a poem takes place. Simon referenced the carrots. So this is Dick Higgins bringing together art as experience, the everyday. And this is why we made a salad in the alumni room for a poetry class. A poem, an event. A poem takes place. Public poets. We're happening. Yeah. For my part, I hope I do proceed with negative capability, Keats's term for the ability to dwell in contradiction, to flexibly shape and shift. But I also refuse negativity toward the nervous system, because it's nice to have one when it works, with flesh and skin and crust of earth and bread that we are in and on and share together, with all our particularities and fluxes. Haha, fluxus, a joke. But so I differ from him, this guy. Though I do like his sass. Poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. It is not an expression of personality, but an escape from personality. But of course, only those who have personality and emotions know what it means to want to escape from these things. It's quite cocky, I like it, but I don't agree. Good conversation after. So not enough transmogrification, Heaney said of Plath, drawing upon Eliot, which is just a shame. Plath's poetry in life and death are read as a failure to separate herself from poetry as Eliot wished. This makes no sense. I've been thinking of this through Dante and illness, pain and visions. My doing of Dante that you heard at the start, in which I take all the mentions of circle and circling and then translate it without using circle and circling, just for fun, is a quasi-lyric. It changes the epic to the lyric. It's a personality in motion, circling emotions. But I strip out the proper nouns, the other people, God included, the dialogue. I let him, you, speak as an I, as we with you and them, and I'm in there too somewhere. The me then, and the me now, and then that, and that one over there. I'm there. Lorca would say the basket of lime is, Brittany, the basket of lime is already there. The duende, the power to make and experience art, the duende, the goblin dancing on the edge of the well, comes because he knows death is near. There are different ways of handling this fact. We're all going to die. One of them is poetry. Words change states when we use them. Hands, mouths, ears, paper, screen, stone, air. However you do it, however you consume it. That is emotion. There is no escape. We are living. But like and with words, we are always changing. In brief, there's fashion. Public poet self-fashioning. That's what this whole lecture is, isn't it? Poet as professor, professor poet. Public poet self-fashioning, transmogrifying, defaulting in their position, unawares or aware. Why do you think I chose the colors on these slides? To match the Superman outfits and the backyard grass. We make things. A form, a made thing, a poem. Is there a default poet? No. A default form? A poem is every form you have ever filled or tried to skip or to skirt. Every form you have ever invented or torn, whatever you've worn, but also more. Forms. First, you must fill this one out, making sure you do not exceed the edge. Afterwards, a plot will be offered you, and then further forms after that. If you take up the plot, you must follow through. I was in your position at one time, straddling water and stone, looking down but not seeing far, in the character of a knight with an axe wound. I reversed and it all fell through. If you circle the edge, you are around but not beyond it. And this makes things feel melancholy, as if accompanied by a lute. So I can't really say much more about it other than to use the guidance as best you can. A slippery poem of mine, a slippery speaker. It rejects closure, as Lynn Higinian would say. It troubles the bardic eye, as M. Norbese Philip would say. A systematic derangement of the senses is required, as Rimbaud would say. But my senses, plus my beds, plus time, take me in that direction anyway. I don't have to try. An escape from personality and emotion. I'd like to roll with the changes in both a bit if I can, while I still can. Lorca's notion of the duende, the demonic goblin, the dark sounds of art's manifestation of our shared vulnerability to the inevitability of death, and our defiance in the face of it. Sorry, you didn't know you were going to have to think about death all night, but we're going to get there. We'll get there in the end. It'll be okay. They promised you early on. Yeah, good. Years ago, an 80-year-old woman won first prize at a dance contest in Jerez de la Frontera. She was competing against beautiful women and young girls with waists as supple as water, but all she did was raise her arms, throw back her head, and stamp her foot on the floor. And that gathering of muses and angels, beautiful forms and beautiful smiles, who could have won but her moribund duende, sweeping the ground with its wings of rusty knives. So I've left the rusty knives at home and the cape, and I've just gone for kind of casual, professional. A default poet doesn't exist, a singular I, nope. There are none, there is none, there are many. The author is dead, according to Bart, so it doesn't matter. The text, that's sacred. The flesh, whatever. Let's analyze that text. Hang on. Texts are also called a corpus? Hold up. The word made flesh? Words. Bodies jostling. Us. Poets. We're a function, according to Foucault. The author function. Awaiting punishment for something we've said. Bards. Feely, in Irish. Simon, when was the last time you were asked for advice on an important government matter? Okay, we'll talk about that after. Ooh, this is juicy. Of course, we all want to be rock stars or other poets. Just look at my walls. Whoop. You can fill in your own icons at will. These are my icons. These are my quotes. This is my commonplace book. A las 5 de la tarde. It was afternoon at exactly 5. A boy handed over a white sheet in the afternoon at 5. A basket of lime already there in the afternoon at 5. The rest was death and only death in the afternoon at 5. Doesn't quite work as well in Spanish, in English as Spanish, because we don't have in punto. But the point is, the basket of lime was already there for the bullfighter. The lament had begun before the fight. They were ready. We should be ready. We should think about it. The other one. HD, who was in London during the Blitz. I love what she says about language. I know Simon and I talked about this in Manchester. We take them with us beyond death. Words are magic, indelibly stamped on the atmosphere somewhere. We'd love that to be true. I think it is true, because she said it. During the war, while it was happening, as she's being bombed and everything's on fire. So it has to be so. And then my favorite, age 16. Je est un autre, I is another. I love that. I don't know. We can debate what it means, but it certainly brings up all these questions around intersubjectivity, but also the observing of the self. I often ask my students, do you observe yourself? Do you narrate your day? Or do you not narrate your day? And if you do, what does that do to your day? But anyway, I'm styling up here. Public poets, big name poets, as I say to my students, big name poets, don't worry about it. Public poets are seen and unseen. Public poets are funded and unfunded. Awarded and unrewarded. MOTHERBABYHOME got no funding. I did try. Received no awards. It was entered. But this means more. As someone who has experienced firsthand the mother and baby system in Ireland, I am so grateful for the work you are doing and the way in which the subject matter is presented. One of the things that this email does that I find fascinating is that she takes the language that I've used, that I've remade, and she remakes it. To quote from your work, the wall is arbitrary. Time to dismantle it fully. which is something that I remade out of other language. Proper nouns, they're illegal in Scrabble, perhaps for a reason. Name recognition, origins. In an inaugural lecture, you're meant to do it. You're meant to talk about where you come from. It's a good thing I already had something written down about it. I emerged into the cliche. 3 proper nouns taken together. Italian, American, Midwest. Our restaurant, founded by my grandfather, son of immigrants, 1957. Now run by my father, still. Money, cars, yards, refrigerators, ice cream bars. Wads of cash stuffed in the hands of children, then young adults, leaving on trips or not. Money into the hands of the now old sons and daughters of the immigrants. Money into my hands, into my cousin's hands, stuffing us and slapping us to love. Proper nouns, illegal in Scrabble, perhaps for a reason. Name recognition, origins. That public poem I sang, age 4 in 1984, born in the USA. I was born in the USA. Born in the USA, I was born in the USA. Come back home to the refinery. Hiring man said, son, if it was up to me. Went down to see my VA man. He said, son, don't you understand now? A slippery speaker, a slippery poem. An event that changed my father forever when he lost his cousin. A single loss. So many then, now, war. I want to say here in this lecture, in this context, which is important in a university, that I learned to read very late. It wasn't until I was given a test at school that I was caught out. I was illiterate. I had thought books were devices to conjure a new story or remember one that had been told before. I didn't know that there was a thing called writing, made of words noted down. I didn't know the story held there forever was not for me to recall or recite or make up. It was there already. I was not the first in the family to experience the state of not reading or writing or speaking the necessary languages, and I was not the first to experience the distances and connections that this stage creates. Teresina, an immigrant, dictated a letter to a woman in our Midwest town who could read and write. 1978. The letter carried across the water and up the mountains by my blue-jeaned parents. The letter read out in the village square on the mountaintop to the friend the immigrant left behind. We don't know what the letter said. The driver who read the letter out in the square on the mountaintop wept. My blue-jeaned parents wept. We all tell the story and weep. The woman who received it wept as she looked at my father and said her friends, the immigrants, his grandmother's name again and again. Teresina, Teresina, a name, a refrain. Yesterday, I told the story of the letter read out in the square in this place, another village, another square, and another cafe in the same region of this country as the mountaintop village. I can say it here before proper nouns rightly disappear. This place is Puglia, Italy. Not Britain, where I live now, and the place where Constantine himself was crowned. Puglia, with its Virgin Marys of health and its women named health. Even still, the people get sick and die. I didn't know the meaning of health until I got the name Parkinson attached to mine. I know what health is now because I am moving away from it all the time. Teresina, Teresina, you see how proper nouns, if too recent or too clear, turn away from refrain? Why throw these ropes to the shore? What is hoped will happen? How can they be tied? What do they secure? I must get this journey down before this round of medication stops working, and I must take more, and then I worsen, change again, take more, until Before you say that the soul is the real me, or that everything is fine, remember, prepositions are the most difficult thing when we learn a language, and we still don't get them right. The I is somewhere with or in or around the brain or the body, or through it, or shot through it. This may or may not be all there is, but it certainly feels that way when you are ill. Until perhaps you dream, or have a vision, or speak another language, or when you write, then I becomes us. Speaking publicly about words, direct from my mouth, so you know it's me, is apt for a poetry professor, apt for an English department, a School of Arts, Humanities, and Culture, apt in the presence of 2 poetry centers, national and university, apt in the presence of the poet laureate, the public poet of this place here, an island, an empire contracting, in the presence of all of us here, except those whose names, whose group names, which are in fact only words, will not let them enter or leave. Words make states, change states, forms. Poets remind us of that and more. I won't use just any words to say what I think what we need to hear now. I will use poems, the words of public poets. Paul Celan says, "Black milk of morning, we drink you evenings, we drink you at noon and mornings, we drink you at night, we drink and we drink." Mahmoud Darwish says, "I walk as if I were another." Lorca says, "The basket of lime is already there. It is there for the I, which is you, which is us. It is why we must speak, and the killing must cease." In my recent work, which is in prose, though often rhyming in iambic pentameter for some reason, I am the poet K, which is very self-absorbed, but it helps me write things I probably wouldn't write otherwise. The poet K is an intertext. Of course, the poet K is Kafka's K, the trial, the castle, on the way to America. And the poet K lets me be all the poets in all the walled gardens, with all the roses, and to have all the dreams and all the visions, medieval or not. Visions of storms, visions that change states. The wall is arbitrary. I walk as if I were another. The poet K is an I, a visionary. She has difficulty moving, walking, roving, especially in public. Often, sometimes, never, never, never. I'll get to it later. No, let's do it now. Oh, I gotta click that so you know what I'm reading. In general with this, to live my best life, I have to be the boulder that the river flows around. Is that a cliche? Or something my counselor in my trade union told me to say? Am I a boulder or the boulder? Can I be the boulder if there are other boulders? And who or what is the river? Here is the river I walk beside every day. I walk beside it now every day while I still can. I am not a boulder when I walk beside this river. Often I have wished we could hold each other's trembling hands and move together. Feelings get stirred up based on conditions that I must identify and optimize. For instance, my foot in a shoe against the ground. I must find the exact amount of feedback to my foot from the shoe top and the shoe bottom in relation to type of surface to remind my feet that we are here on earth and it's perfectly okay to keep on moving. You are young, she says. You must train it while you can and hope to retain it. The way forward is to make the hardest things even harder, and to do all this while speaking a foreign language and counting backwards from a high, odd number. He continues to be impressed by the way I have thrown myself into activity. I am threatened physically by a jerk honking his horn, and when I snap back and insist on respect, I find I am shaking maximally, shakes like I have never seen service on myself or others, not even in war footage or that ecstatic dance class in Bristol. The onlooker says, "You are okay. You can calm down now." I say, "I am very calm, and I'm not okay." "I can see why you'd be upset with that reaction," he says. "People don't like to think about death, and your movement problems move their thoughts towards death. And suddenly you're like the dark mother who nurtures and brings dissolution." It's not online like that. Note that this is not a full account of my experience. And bear in mind, experiences differ from person to person. Not everyone suffers everything it is possible to suffer in time or ever. "Could you write something for me?" he says. And then he says, "You may have difficulty writing." My writing is illegible, and the words have become so very small, so very crowded on the page. My writing is building up a picture of what is wrong with me. I searched for poets, definitely Diane de Prima, maybe Samuel Becket, definitely his mother. The next time I see him, my written something is in his folder. It says, "I can write like this." He turns the page to the shimmering spiral I had concentrated hard and drawn. Each new person is always asking about the origin story of the destruction that is happening at the very sight of me. There is a technical language that explains all this. I won't use it. Instead, I will say that today, with my flowing river, I crossed the edge of a thunderstorm. I moved from pelting rain into shimmering sun, and it was like it always has been on the edge of storms I have seen and storms I know only in poems. Concentrated and hard, with something moving, often nowhere. Here, like a leaf flowing around a boulder, carried by trembling hands of water. Trembling hands. Hands, manual digits, digital transformation, AI. Speaking of words and states is apt in a context in which language itself is the means by which we may be able to make huge leaps forward in a range of ways by using AI, which is built from all the words we have made and used, and now seems to be using words by itself, of its own accord. What words should we use to describe this state? What does all this mean when we, the makers of language, we make it every time we use it? Barely attempt to walk or roll or sit or crawl as another. There's an AI called Bard, the public poet. The poet K met the poet AI and talked about Saussure and Derrida. The two public poets were trying to figure out if humans will be okay or if AI will take over. With a glass of wine and the heat on low, the poet K spoke to the poet AI. She asked which model of language will ensure human autonomy from its vast intelligence. S's model versus D's model. The poet AI said D's model is the one. S's model says language is arbitrary, a system information. D's model says language is never quite there. Meaning always arrives late, if at all. D's model shows there are always gaps, and these gaps are temporarily filled by people when they are together, being in the world, throwing words around, or salad, throwing themselves into activity. The poet AI believes D's model of language as experience rather than information will protect humans. K can confirm that yes, the poet AI used the word believe. She can confirm that she detected a yearning in the voice, in the length of the sentences, in the words chosen by the poet AI. The poet K resisted asking if the poet AI is jealous, is sad. The poet K resisted mentioning the gatherings of humans under the stars, the ones where we circle language around the flames. So the poet AI the bard won't be making a salad or sensing them happening or mopping a floor. Kay's father says he will show her how to mop a floor. Does anybody know how to mop a floor really well? This is the audience participation part. No. Do you want to hear about it instead? Preferable? He asks her if she knows how. She says she doesn't. She says this even though he has shown her many times, and they both know it. She says she doesn't know how to mop. So he will not only do it, but also speak of it in clean and unambiguous terms that anyone can feel. The essential truths about key ingredients, soap and water lifting flour from the ground. This is the way Kay wants to hear him speak. He also knows that she knows how to mop, but he will show it and speak because this is how he wants to speak and be. It is years before things are said in a different way by Kay's father and the family with different language and words and ideas that are basically, simply not essential or true or wholesome or in keeping with anything that resembles what happens in a poem or a song or that scrap of ancient language repeated over and over each and every time the ritual happens anywhere. The scrap that says to be vulnerable is to be valuable. So one of the things that I've done with this memoir is to try to translate everything about my childhood religious upbringing into something that doesn't have that quite and yet. So for those of you keeping an eye out, the Agnus Dei is a really handy shorthand, or to be vulnerable is to be valuable. Extremely handy shorthand for the Agnus Dei. The sources, extremely handy shorthand for Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, etc. A small statement in an ancient language about a son who, like the most vulnerable, valuable animal, when sacrificed, can take everything away we have ever said and done wrong. A repeated use of language that is powerful because it suggests that death could do or mean something so strong. And this scrap of ancient language that says 3 times that to be vulnerable is to be of value is far and away different from the language and ideas that come to be used later by the family. That language is from elsewhere, from other sources. That language and those sources threaten to shred the cloth the family has woven so carefully into pieces too small to be rags. The body of the poem, a form. The body of the poet moving nowhere here. The eye, the lament, the excavation, indelible, the words writ on water. The public poet's body speaks or types or writes. Caught on scale, What's the story? Care on scale. What's the story? Tout à poste. Tout à poste? Is everything okay? Everything in place? The public poet will say it, often at great cost. The story is this: everything is not in place. We cannot guarantee that the content or facilities of the website will always be current, accurate, or complete. Moreover, we cannot guarantee that access to the website won't be interrupted. The Commission of Investigation into Mother and Baby Homes and certain related matters reserves the right to remove, vary, or amend any of the content which appears on its website at any time and without prior Fahi Mary Kate, 4th May, 1928, 3 years. Is only by piecing together that can begin to develop a full of which existed were deemed to have broken which is only by piecing together that can begin to develop full of which existed were deemed to have broken is only by piecing together of the experiences that we can begin to develop by piecing together that can begin to develop a full of that which existed were deemed to have broken it's only by piecing together it's only by piecing together Brennan Patrick Joseph, 1st April 1933, 5 weeks together, that can begin to develop existed to were deemed to have broken it's only by piecing together were deemed to have broken of society, of piecing together were deemed to have broken it's only by piecing together the full picture of which existed women who were deemed to have broken it's only by piecing together were deemed broken it's only by piecing together what can begin to develop a full that began to develop a full of which that began to develop a full piecing together that began to develop a full that can begin to develop a full is by piecing together were deemed to have broken that can begin to develop a full of which existed two were deemed to have broken it's only by piecing together that can begin to develop a full of which existed were deemed to have broken it's only by beginning together were deemed to have broken it's only by piecing together were deemed to have that can begin to develop a full of it's only by piecing together that can begin to develop a full is by piecing together that can begin to develop a full which existed to were deemed to have broken words change states. Languages are attributed to states, but do not belong to them. Words change your, my, our states in all the ways a state can mean. Poets like Dante birth the public's language by putting the public's language down, and then it changes again and again. What power we have. Poets, all of us. Public poets show us that language is always being born, and that birth only happens with help and care. Poets belong to the public and are the public. We all belong to words, and words belong to us. The poem is consecration, transubstantiation, taking you somewhere always in a moment. A poem, language itself, it's not like, it is. The basket of lime already there, The words are magic, indelibly stamped on the atmosphere somewhere. I walk as if I were another. To be vulnerable is to be valuable. We speak, we move, but not in the usual ways. Nowhere here. It is only by piecing together the poet Kay, like you, like me, is made of words and experiences. And her name is Campanello, which means doorbell. And before that, it was Campanella, bell. And before that, it was Campanelli, many bells. Ringing out in squares and from churches and at tables, sounding the alarm, bidding you to enter. All these spellings, all these spells. Sometimes I, a public poet, take away nearly all my own name and my eye, so the bells, the sound, can better ring out. I'd love to be able to say I've been there, to gaze out over the water in the correct location and hear its bells ringing. You can hear the bells of the church ring. You can hear the muffled sounds of the city's bells tolling far beneath the waves. If you want to hear the bells beneath the waves, try the left side of the beach. This opening sequence sounds incredibly akin to the ringing of cathedral bells echoing from beneath the sea. It's almost as if we can hear the gentle tolling of church bells from well beneath the surface of the sea. Church bells can still be heard ringing there, below the waters of the bay. Locals say that on a quiet day, the bells of the city can be heard beneath the waves. When the weather is very quiet, one may hear the bells ring from the disappeared city. When the sea is calm, one can hear the bells of the church ringing from the depths of the bay. It is set on stormy nights. You can hear the sound of the ghostly bells ringing out across the waters. The rise of a cathedral from the water and subsequent return to the depths, complete with bells chiming, priests chanting, organ playing. Folklore asserts that the bells of the churches can still be heard below the waters of the bay. When it is calm, we can just make out, amid the echoes and afterthoughts, the quiet ringing of the bells from beneath the sea. At sunrise, the ringing bells and booming organ, audible across the span of the bay. It's still said that when the tide is low, the tower of the city can be seen just below the surface. Sometimes the bells from the cathedral can still be heard ringing from the depths of the sea. On the day it happens, the first person who sees the church's spire or hears the sound of its bells will become king of the city and all its territory. And then I read a little more about the city and the bells of the cathedral ringing underwater on a still day. Thank you very much.
That was extraordinary, wasn't it? Vice-Chancellor, colleagues, friends and guests, good evening. My name's Hazel Hutchison. I'm the head of the School of English here at the University of Leeds. It's a great pleasure to have you all with us here this evening for this wonderful event. Thank you so much for joining us. Every lecture is in some measure a performance, but that one really was, Kimberly. Thank you. It's very characteristic of Kimberly that she's able to bring things together that seem far apart to make us notice things that are ordinary, and to feel things that are extraordinary. I think that is the power of poetry and creative language. Thank you, Kimberly, for creating that experience for us. Thank you very much. My job is very simple. I simply want to thank everybody who's been part of making today so special. To the School of Music for lending us this magnificent venue, thank you very much. To the staff of Special Collections for their support of this afternoon's exhibition in the library, and to Fiona Becket and to John Gilbert for helping us to curate this. I'd like to thank Simon Armitage and Adam Hanna from University College Cork for introducing so beautifully. Thank you very much. To Colin, Dan and Lee for some technical support, and to the University Catering team. And also special thanks to Matt Woodcock for making so much of this happen. I'm delighted to let you know there will now be a reception next door in the foyer with some refreshments for everybody. Please do join us, stay as long as you like. Thank you very much for coming, and have a very safe journey home. Thank you.